अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स, उम्मीद है आप खैरियत से होंगे। आपको याद होगा कि पिछला लेक्चर हमारा प्रो सोशल बिहेवियर के बारे में था। टुडे विल बी आल्सो टॉकिंग अबाउट द सेम इशू एंड दैट इज प्रो सोशल बिहेवियर। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल आई वुड लाइक टू हैव अ रिव्यू ऑफ व्हाट वी डिड इन द प्रीवियस लेक्चर। As you would have remembered that we started with talking about what is pro-social behavior. So pro-social behavior is when the intention is to help other people. इसके अलावा हमने ये बात की कि there could be sometime a helping behavior, but the intention could be different, and there could be several circumstances when people would be involving, although in helping behavior, and they will be willing to help other people, लेकिन intention उनकी different हो सकती है। इस सिलसिले में मैंने आपको एक मिसाल दी थी 19th century philosopher Auguste Comte की। He talked about two kinds of help. One is called altruistic and the other one is egoistic helping. Altruistic helping is when we are helping other people and the intention is the welfare of other people, और उसके बदले में हमें कोई reward वगैरह नहीं चाहिए होता, although people would have a good feeling afterwards that they have helped somebody. इसके बरक्स जो ईगोइस्टिक हेल्पिंग है दैट हैज़ ईगोइस्टिक मोटिव्स, और उसके पीछे असल में मकसद ये होता है कि वी वांट टू हैव द पर्पस इज़ आवर ओन वेलफेयर, एंड यू कैन सी दैट द अल्टीमेट बिहेवियर इज सेम एंड दैट इज़ हेल्पिंग बट द मोटिव इज़ डिफरेंट। देन वी आल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ प्रो सोशल बिहेवियर। वन वाज कैजुअल हेल्प, जो आम जिंदगी में हम छोटी मोटी चीज़ों में लोगों की हेल्प करते हैं, जैसे किसी को रास्ता बता देना, और कोई छोटी छोटी चीज़ें, जैसे कोई हमसे छोटी सी चीज़ पूछता है, टाइम पूछता है और हम उसका जवाब दे देते हैं। देन वी आल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट सब्सटेंशियल हेल्प, फॉर एग्जांपल लैंडिंग मनी टू समबॉडी, अपनी किताबें दे देना, नोट्स दे देना, एंड सम अदर काइंड ऑफ सब्सटेंशियल हेल्प। एंड देन थर्डली वी टॉक्ड अबाउट इमोशनल हेल्प, व्हेन टू लिसन टू समबॉडी एट द टाइम ऑफ स्ट्रेस, एंड दैट इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट काइंड ऑफ हेल्प दैट ह्यूमन बींग्स प्रोवाइड टू ईच अदर, क्योंकि उसकी बेस पर ही फिर रिलेशनशिप्स जो हैं वो इस्टेब्लिश होते हैं, एंड पीपल could help other people while listening to them, and in that way people have a catharsis of their emotions by telling their problem to significant others, to friends, parents, family, or whoever. Then finally we talked about emergency help as far as types of pro-social behavior or help is concerned. Emergency help is rendered to somebody when a person is in the time of crisis, और कोई emergency होती है तो उस वक्त हम उसकी help करते हैं, for example saving somebody's life and so on. Then we talked about different explanations of pro-social behavior. Why do we help? And the first explanation was evolutionary perspective. Evolutionary theorists have claimed that people have evolved in that way through natural selection. They have learned to help each other. लेकिन इसके अलावा one very important principle of evolutionary theory is that the basic intention of human beings is to survive and reproduce. So reproduction के लिए ज़रूरी है कि one must survive, and in that way it is contradictory to pro-social behavior, because if one is concentrating on one's own survival, तो फिर pro-social behavior थोड़ा सा difficult हो जाता है. And this was explained by kin selection or kinship selection, कि हम उन लोगों की हेल्प आमतौर पर करते हैं जो हमारे से रिलेटेड होते हैं। एंड theorists also said that it is not actually personal pro-social behavior, personal selection, it is actually the gene selection. हम चाहते हैं कि हमारे जो जीन्स हैं वो ट्रांसमिट हो जाएं, अगली जनरेशन में मुंतकिल हो, and that is why we are helping them to survive. And then some other explanations were also presented that why people help each other. And some people also claimed that it is due to natural selection that people have evolved to help one another. Then we also talked about different socio-cultural explanations as far as pro-social behavior is concerned. One explanation was reciprocity effect, that we help other because we expect that in future we also will be helped in the same way. So ये basically जो है that maintains that it is to keep fairness in interpersonal relations. And then we talked about responsibility dimension as far as socio-cultural explanations are concerned. इससे मुराद ये है कि we feel responsible for those people who are dependent on us and that is why we want to help them. और responsible हम कई लोगों की तरफ feel करते हैं and that depends on our social role also. For example, doctors feel responsible for the welfare and health of their patients. Teachers are having responsibility of their students and adults feel responsibility for the safety and health of children. And then we talked about justice hypothesis in this dimension, that we think that if something bad happens to good people, then it's our duty that we should help them. And then we talked about learning perspective. As you would have known after many lectures of social psychology, that learning paradigm is basically based on two principles. One is reinforcement and the other is observation. So both of these are true to a great extent, because when we observe other people and they are doing pro-social behavior, then we learn that. So we model those people who are involved in pro-social activities. And then the other hypothesis, which is about reward, that whenever our pro-social behavior is rewarded, there is greater chance that it will be repeated in future. And then finally we talked about when do we help, and in this respect we talked about bystander intervention model that was presented by Letney and Darley. And that intervention model states that it is not only because of one factor that we decide to help another person. It is actually because of several processes or steps that we think that we should render help to someone or not. And each step that we cover, it takes us to the process of or to the final step of helping, but it doesn't mean कि ये अकेला जो होगा वो काफ़ी होगा for helping somebody. और वो आपको याद होगा कि मैंने 4 dimensions का उसमें जिक्र किया था, and I also mentioned that some theorists divide it into 5 steps. So the first and second could be combined, that you think a situation is critical and help is warranted. And the second one or third, अगर आप इसको 5 हिस्सों में divide करें, that was that is it your responsibility? And the third one was that if it is your responsibility, then you think that it is not too risky and help could be provided. And finally, you decide that if I decide to help, then how shall I do that? So you should be able to know कि help जो है वो देनी कैसे है. ये हमने bystander intervention model पढ़ना शुरू किया था और अब हम इसको elaborate करते हैं further. So bystander intervention जो है उसके ऊपर मैंने आपको बताया था, इस पर काम किया है Letney and Darley ने, and they pointed out that actually there are 2 psychological processes that can prevent helping at different stages. तो 2 चीज़ें हैं जो कि लोगों को दूसरों की मदद करने से रोकती हैं. वो जो 4 स्टेप्स हमने डिस्कस किए थे. अब वो कौन कौन सी 2 चीज़ें हैं? लेट्स सी दैट. फर्स्ट इज द ऑडियंस इनहिबिशन इफेक्ट, एंड देन द सेकंड वन इज डिफ्यूजन ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. अब इन दोनों के बारे में तफसील से बात करते हैं. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी वुड डिस्कस द ऑडियंस इनहिबिशन इफेक्ट. एंड व्हाट इज दैट? People are generally inhibited from helping for fear of negative evaluation by others if they intervene and the situation is not an emergency. आपने ये देखा होगा कि there were 4 steps in bystander intervention model, and in the first step, जो कि combination 2 का भी हो सकता है, you decide whether the situation is critical and help is required or not. And at that stage, people are very conscious that if they render help to somebody, maybe the situation is not that critical, and other people will be evaluating them negatively कि ये यहाँ पे क्या ज़रूरत थी, ये शख्स खामखा आगे आ रहा है, ये हीरो बनने की कोशिश कर रहा है, and so on. So people are thinking that if help is not warranted, then they may be critically evaluated by the people who are present there. इस सिलसिले में एक स्टडी का जिक्र करना चाहूँगी. दैट वाज कंडक्टेड बाय लेटने एंड डार्ले इन 1968. In that study, that was experimental study, जो कि ज़्यादातर आपने देखा होगा कि सोशल साइकोलॉजी में जो स्टडीज़ हैं दे आर एक्सपेरिमेंटल स्टडीज़. अब उस स्टडी में क्या हुआ कि पार्टिसिपेंट्स वर इनवाइटेड टू पार्टिसिपेट इन वन एक्सपेरिमेंट, और वो एक्सपेरिमेंट जो था वो उनको कहा गया कि ये आप इस कमरे में बैठें और द प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ अर्बन लाइफ, उन्होंने कहा कि ये प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ अर्बन लाइफ पे हम एक एक्सपेरिमेंट करेंगे, और उनको कहा कि आप एक क्वेश्चनियर इतनी देर में बैठ के फिल करें. सो दे वर गिवन वन क्वेश्चनियर टू फिल, एंड there were three actually experimental conditions. While the participant was filling that questionnaire, they divided this situation into three conditions. One was when the participant was alone filling out that questionnaire. And the other condition was when besides participant there were three other participants and they were working on their own, same task wo kar rahe the. And then the third condition was when there were two confederates present, and these confederates were very unconcerned what was happening in the room, or what was happening in the room. I'm just coming to that point now. When they were filling that questionnaire, then what happened that after some time white smoke started entering the room through a small air vent. एक जगह जहाँ से वो कोई सुराख था वेंटिलेशन के लिए, वहाँ से स्मोक आनी शुरू हो गई. और एक्सपेरिमेंटर्स ने 6 मिनट तक इंतज़ार किया, और उन 6 मिनट्स में दे ऑब्जर्व द रिएक्शन एंड बिहेवियर ऑफ द पार्टिसिपेंट्स. सो व्हाट वुड द पार्टिसिपेंट्स डू इन डिफरेंट सिचुएशंस? एंड रिमेंबर देयर वर 3 सिचुएशंस. इन वन सिचुएशन द पार्टिसिपेंट वाज अलोन. In the second situation, there were 3 more people working in the same room. And in the third situation, there were 2 confederates कि जब smoke आनी शुरू हुई, तो they seemed not bothered by that smoke. वो बिल्कुल अपना ध्यान से काम कर रहे थे, and they were not paying any attention to that experimental condition. और वो क्या थी कि smoke कमरे में दाखिल होना शुरू हो गई है. So what would be the reaction of people who are kept in different situations? Let's see that through a graphic representation. So you can see in this graph that the person who was alone, he took less time for doing something about that emergency situation. और emergency situation से deal करने का क्या तरीका था कि आपको smoke नज़र आती है तो it is a signal of danger, and the person could either check, या तो वहाँ जाके वो check करे, उसके बाद go out and tell this is happening experimenter को या जो लोग बाहर मौजूद हैं. On the left side जो कि आपका y axis है, उस पर आप ये देख रहे हैं cumulative proportion reporting smoke. यहाँ पे आपको नज़र आ रहा है कि कितनी ट्रायल्स में जो स्मोक जो थी वो रिपोर्ट की गई. एंड ऑन द एक्स एक्सिस इज द टाइम फ्रॉम स्मोक इन्फ्यूजन. और आपने ये देखा कि 6 मिनट तक ये जो है वो दिखाया गया है कि 6 मिनट तक व्हाट हैपन्स. सो यू कैन सी द पर्सन हु वाज अलोन, ही टुक लेस टाइम टू रिपोर्ट फॉर दैट एमरजेंसी एज कंपेयर टू दैट द पर्सन हु वाज विद 3 नाइव पार्टिसिपेंट्स. नाइव इसलिए कि वो तीनों चारों लोग आपस में इंटरेक्ट नहीं कर रहे थे, एंड दे डिडंट नो कि हु इज हु. So they took more time to report for that emergency. And you can see that ultimately जब वो 3 लोग जो इकट्ठे 4 लोग बैठे हुए थे, उसमें से after 38 trials, what happened? Only 1 person intervened and reported that problem to experimenter. As you can see that in 75% of the trials, people who were alone, they took some step about that emergency. और हैरत की बात यह है कि where people were not doing anything, like where there were 2 confederates who were not bothered about the situation, none of the participants actually thought that they should be helping in that probable emergency situation. अब इससे हमें ये क्या नतीजा निकलता है कि when we look at the reaction of other people, then our reaction is also dependent on that, and sometimes we behave how other people are behaving, and sometimes our behavior is partly or totally dependent on the reaction of other people. और इसी तरह के एक्सपेरिमेंट्स आपने देखे थे ओबीडियंस स्टडीज़ में कि उसमें भी ये हुआ था कि when other people are administering electric shocks to other people, then participants were more inclined to do that act. और जब उसमें से किसी ने इनकार कर दिया कि yes they are not ready to administer those shocks and they left experimental lab, तो यहाँ से भी कुछ लोगों ने इनकार कर दिया इलेक्ट्रिक शॉक्स पार्टिसिपेंट्स को देने से. So you can see that how our behavior is influenced by the reaction of other people, or in other words you can say that how we are influenced by social pressure. Another experiment of the same sort, and this experiment was conducted by Letne and Rodin in 1969. In that experiment, experimenters left participant in a room और उसको अकेले छोड़ दिया, और उसके बाद ये देखा गया कि after several minutes a tape was played in which a crashing sound was heard and then the experimenter screaming was heard. तो वो असल में टेप थी, लेकिन पार्टिसिपेंट को तो नहीं पता था कि ये जो प्ले की जा रही है ये टेप है. ही थॉट कि देयर इज समबॉडी इन द नेक्स्ट रूम, एडजेसेंट रूम, एंड दैट स्क्रीमिंग द एक्सपेरिमेंटर वाज सेइंग, oh my god, my foot, I can't move it, oh my ankle, I can't get this thing off me. और उसके साथ कुछ आवाज़ें थी कि जैसे कोई चीज़ नीचे गिरी है, और पहले ये लग रहा था कि एक्सपेरिमेंटर जो है वो ऊपर चढ़ने की कोशिश कर रही है कहीं. दैट वाज अ लेडी एक्सपेरिमेंटर एंड शी वाज जस्ट डूइंग समथिंग, और कोई जैसे क्लाइंब करके कोई चीज़ पकड़ने की कोशिश कर रही है, और उसके बाद ये हुआ कि इस तरह से लगा कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें उसके ऊपर गिर गई हैं. ये साउंड्स भी क्रिएट की गई, और उसके बाद उसकी इस तरह से आवाज़ आई कि जिस तरह से वो चीज़ों के नीचे दब गई है. So what was shown that 70% people helped when they were alone, as compared to that 7% helped when they were having unconcerned confederates with them. और इस सिचुएशन में भी इसी तरह से था पिछले एक्सपेरिमेंट की तरह कि the person was either alone or was working with other confederates, and these confederates were unconcerned. So this is a matter of great concern that if there is a time of emergency और कोई शख्स किसी को मार रहा है, ज़ख्मी कर रहा है, इवन इतना ज़्यादा हादसा भी हो सकता है कि कोई किसी को मर्डर करने की कोशिश करता है, एंड अदर पीपल आर नॉट टेकिंग एनी एक्शन. सो व्हाट डज दिस मीन कि क्या हम भी वहाँ साइलेंटली खड़े रहेंगे जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ द फैक्ट दैट अदर पीपल आर नॉट डूइंग एनीथिंग? एंड यू कैन सी दैट दिस इज़ what is happening in most of the incidents of homicide that occur in our country. Now we'll be talking about what are the explanations of audience inhibition, and the evidence has come from conformity research. आपको याद होगा in conformity research we talked about different experiments that were conducted by Ash and Sheriff. जो Sheriff के experiment थे they were about information influence, and we talked about one fact that when the situation is ambiguous, so usually we want to take information from other people, and that serves as a very valuable heuristic. तो जब situation clear नहीं होती and we do not know the answer, तो उस वक्त क्या होता है, we look to others to explain certain situations. So our interpretation in these conditions depend on the interpretation of other people, and we are looking for the explanation of social reality to the audience. तो एक वजह ये होती है कि जब हमें ये पता नहीं होता कि यहाँ पे हेल्प रिक्वायर्ड है कि नहीं, और ऐसा ना हो कि मैं हेल्प करूँ और लोग कहें कि ये इसको हीरो बनने का शौक़ है, या ये खामखा आगे आ गया है और लोग कहें कि नो आई डिडंट हैव अ प्रॉब्लम सो प्लीज़ माइंड योर ओन बिजनेस. तो इस तरह की सिचुएशन में जब एम्बिग्विटी होती है तो आमतौर पर लोग अवॉइड करते हैं दूसरों की हेल्प करने से. द अदर एक्सप्लेनेशन हैज़ कम फ्रॉम एश्स एक्सपेरिमेंट, or as experiments maintain that it is because of normative influence that we are doing most of our acts, that we are having fear of being negatively evaluative. And usually it happens that people have learned to maintain a very cool and calm exterior. बज़ाहिर ये लगता है कि जो है वो दूसरों पे शो नहीं करना चाहते कि अंदर जो भी उनके हो रहा है. And that could be explained for the explanation of person's behavior when other unconcerned or those confederates are present who are not bothered about the emergency situation. उस वक्त जब दूसरे लोग किसी तरह से ये नहीं लग रहा कि उनको emergency affect कर रही है, so we want to also keep that calm exterior from outside, and we do not want to show that we are disturbed by the prospects of that emergency. So these two kinds of explanations has been presented as far as audience inhibition explanations are concerned. Now let's talk about the other explanation of not helping other people, and that is diffusion of responsibility. That was the second step when we talked about 4 steps in bystander intervention model. That is it my responsibility? And we think that other people are also present, so why shall I help? या ये है कि मुझे जल्दी है, इस वक्त मैं बहुत ज़रूरी काम से जा रहा हूँ या जा रही हूँ, तो दूसरा कोई ना कोई हेल्प कर देगा. So in some situations there is a clear emergency. हमें ये पता होता है कि the situation is not ambiguous, and we do not have a fear of that we will be evaluated wrongly by people. तो जो पीछे हमने बात की थी audience inhibition में, उसमें ये 2 चीज़ें थी. One thing that maybe the situation is ambiguous, and the second factor was that we will be evaluated wrongly by public. अब अगर ये दोनों conditions नहीं हैं, there is a clear emergency, then the question is why don't people then help other people who are in emergency? So diffusion of responsibility explanation explains that in some situations there is a clear emergency, but we think that other people are present, so we are less personally responsible. So because of that, some people do not render help to other people when they are in emergency. आपने ये देखा होगा और आपका अपना पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस भी होगा कि बाज़ औक़ात हम सड़क पे जा रहे होते हैं और कोई शख्स जो है वो ज़ख्मी होकर गिरा होता है और बहुत सी गाड़ियाँ पास से गुजर जाती हैं. तो उस वक्त यही वजह होती है, पीपल नो दैट देयर आर सो मैनी पीपल ऑन द रोड, तो डेफिनेटली समबॉडी विल कम एंड हेल्प, और मुझे चूँकि इस वक्त जल्दी है, मुझे काम है, वगैरह वगैरह, इस तरह के एक्सप्लेनेशन हम अपने आप को पेश करते हैं. For explaining diffusion of responsibility, I would like to mention here one experiment that was conducted by Darley and Lettre in 1968. In that experiment, participants were invited to discuss the problems undergraduates are facing in big urban cities like New York. और उनको separate booths में बिठाया गया और उनको ये कहा गया कि वो separate booths में बैठेंगे और through intercom एक दूसरे के साथ बात करेंगे, और एक वक्त में एक ही पार्टिसिपेंट जो है वो बात करेगा और बाकी लोग सुन रहे होंगे, और जब उसकी टर्न ख़त्म हो जाएगी तो द अदर पार्टिसिपेंट विल स्टार्ट टॉकिंग. एंड टू मेक देम कंफर्टेबल, एक्सपेरिमेंट सेड दैट ही वुड नॉट बी लिसनिंग टू व्हाट दे आर टॉकिंग ऑन द इंटरकॉम्स. एंड देयर वर 3 कंडीशंस दैट वर क्रिएटेड in that experiment to better understand the diffusion of responsibility concept. And what were these 3 conditions? In one condition, there was just one person who was who will be talking to some other person through intercom. इसका मतलब ये है कि वो एक पार्टिसिपेंट के अलावा कोई और होगा. दूसरी सिचुएशन में people were told that they were part of either 6 or 3 person group. तो या वो 3 लोगों के साथ बात करेंगे या 6 लोगों के साथ बात करेंगे. And in reality, they were not talking to anybody, but whatever they were hearing, that was all tape recorded. So what happened that first of all, one speaker started choking, or that was a confederate, or वो recorded voice थी. So one of the speakers first started talking and said that, explained that he is a patient of epilepsy, or whenever that person has stress, exams, तो उसको बाज़-औक़ात he has a epileptic fit, उसको दौरा पड़ जाता है. So he would have seizure if there is any problem or stress. Then what happened? Then when that person finished talking, तो फिर दूसरा शख्स ने बोलना शुरू किया और उसके बाद तीसरा, और इस तरह से. अब जाहिर है कि जो शख्स अकेला किसी एक स्ट्रेंजर के साथ बात कर रहा है, उसने सिर्फ इसी शख्स की बात सुनी है और किसी की नहीं सुनी. Then what happened? That one of the speakers, who was the same person who introduced him as a patient of epilepsy, he started choking and saying that he was having an epileptic fit. So अब ये देखना था कि कितने लोग जो हैं उसकी हेल्प के लिए फ़ौरन कुछ करते हैं. And remember there were 3 conditions. एक कंडीशन में एक शख्स समझ रहा है कि वो अकेला है जो इस शख्स की बात सुन रहा है जिसको दौरा पड़ गया है, और दूसरी कंडीशन में 3 लोग जो हैं वो मौजूद हैं, 3 पर्सन ग्रुप. उसमें एक शख्स समझ रहा है कि इस एपिलेप्सी के मरीज़ के अलावा 2 और लोग हैं जो इसकी हेल्प कर सकते हैं. एंड सिमिलर वाज ट्रू फॉर 6 पर्सन ग्रुप. So what happened? The results showed that the percentage of helping decreased as the number of strangers present increased. जितने ज़्यादा लोग ग्रुप में मौजूद थे, अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर परसेप्शन, जो उनको बताया गया था, हेल्प डिक्रीज एंड दैट वाज हैविंग अ नेगेटिव कोरिलेशन। जितने ज़्यादा लोग एक्सपेरिमेंट में बढ़ रहे हैं उतनी ही हेल्प जो है वो डिक्रीज हो रही है। सो दैट शोज अ नेगेटिव कोरिलेशन बिटवीन नंबर ऑफ पीपल एंड बायस्टैंडर्स प्रेजेंट and the help provided. So there was many replications of that study, and in replications it was shown that when the person was alone, 75% of the time he helped, and it dropped to 53% when other people were present with him, or as he was perceiving that other people are present for help. But when it was explained to other people, और उन्हें ये कहा गया कि इस तरह से हुआ है, so all people denied that the presence of others would affect their inclination to help. और उसके बाद जब एक debriefing होती है, आपको मैंने रिसर्च में पढ़ाया था कि debriefing का पर्पस ये होता है कि आप एक्सपेरिमेंट का जो शुरू में मकसद नहीं बताया होता, थोड़ा सी डिसेप्शन होती है, बाद में आप पूरी तरह एक्सप्लेन करते हैं. And when the conditions and all those things which were basically the intention of experiment were explained to them, and they said they were not sure that the situation could be that serious, and they were not sure that what could be done on their part. Now look at that graph, and you can see very clearly when the person was alone and he was listening to that person who was supposed to be having an epileptic fit, then he quickly went for helping. And you can also see that how much time it took for after that person was having fit, तो उसके कितने seconds के बाद जो है the help was rendered. And you can see that that person when was alone, he was quick, and also the more help was provided when people were alone. And as compared to that, when participant was with a stranger, that was a 3 group condition. एक तो वो जिसको epileptic fit पड़ा है वो शख्स, और एक और stranger मौजूद, और एक वो शख्स जो सुन रहा है. So there were 3 people. Then that amount of help was decreased and it took more time. So there was more delay in providing that help. And as compared to that, when there were more people, when there was a group of 6 people, then it considerably decreased. So it shows that when other people are present with us and some emergency situation happens, then we think that it's not only my responsibility, and if I do not provide help because of so and so reasons, then somebody else will provide. Some experiments have also been conducted to look at the kind of help and the quickness of help that is provided on the internet when there are chat groups. और उसमें भी ये देखा गया है कि the diffusion of responsibility also occurs when people need help on the internet. One of these experiments was conducted by Markey in 2000. And in that experiment, more than 4,800 people were monitored in 400 different internet chat groups over a month's time. ये उस तरह का एक्सपेरिमेंट नहीं है जो आप जो है वो एक एक्सपेरिमेंटल लैब में करते हैं, बट दिस इज नेचुरली occurring जो भी फिनोमेना है, दैट दे वर ऑब्जर्विंग पीपल हु वर टॉकिंग ऑन डिफरेंट चैट फोरम्स. और उस वक्त जो था वो सम कॉन्फिडरेट हु वाज अ पार्ट ऑफ दैट ग्रुप, ही सेड दैट ही नीड्स हेल्प, कोई इमरजेंसी मेरे साथ हो गई है. एंड the results showed that it took longer for people to receive help as the number of people present in a computer-mediated chat group increased. जितने ज़्यादा लोग chat में involved थे उस वक्त, उतनी ही help कम थी. So this also proved the hypothesis of diffusion of responsibility, and that stops us from helping other people. लेकिन एक और चीज़ यहाँ पे मैं mention करना चाहूँगी कि that diffusion of responsibility was totally eliminated when the bystander was called by name. जैसे for example, अगर लोग जो हैं वो एक group form कर रहे हैं and they were chatting with each other on internet, और one of them is Tanveer and the other is Ali. तो अगर अली को कोई प्रॉब्लम होती है और अली ये कहता है Tanveer please help me, तो then that bystander effect, which is diffusion of responsibility, was no more there, and that person was quickly there to help. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि वहाँ पर एक्चुअली बाकी लोग जो हैं वो फिल्टर आउट हो गए हैं, बिकॉज दैट person who is in trouble is calling the other person by name. There is some explanation which has been presented by other people as far as bystander intervention model is concerned. Basically, the work of Darley shows that when people are in emergency, why don't we help? तो नॉन इंटरवेंशन की क्या वजूहात होती हैं? इसके बरक्स जो है some other work was done by Plevian et al. In 1981, and they explained that why do people help when other people are in emergency? तो उन्होंने ये explain किया है कि हम फिर help क्यों करते हैं? And they said that actually there are other factors important in the decision of helping somebody. And they actually have extended the work of Darley and Letney, और उसी को उन्होंने complement किया है. And as far as bystander intervention model is concerned, Plevian and her colleagues talk about the later steps, जो उसमें later steps involved हैं, rather than the first two steps. They talk about the later step involved in that decision making procedure. So let's see कि ये क्या है. They talk about several costs that could be involved in helping somebody, or several costs that could also be involved when you do not help somebody. अब ये cost of helping क्या हो सकती है? Cost of helping could be of numerous kinds. It could be waste of your time. It could be waste of your money. आप किसी को हॉस्पिटल अपनी गाड़ी में लेके जाते हैं, फिर हो सकता है कि emergency में आपको उसके पैसे भी देने पड़े उसकी ट्रीटमेंट के. And then it could be losing your own life also. अगर बहुत ज़्यादा कोई झगड़ा शदीद है, जैसे किटी का केस मैंने आपको न्यूयॉर्क में who was murdered by a man at night, तो वो मिसाल दी थी. तो उसमें ये भी हो सकता है कि somebody comes for help, that person would also be stabbed by that person who was actually involved in stabbing Kitty. तो इस तरह की मिसालें भी हो सकती हैं. So the costs could be numerous. और सिमिलरली द कॉस्ट ऑफ नॉट हेल्पिंग कुड बी न्यूमरस. जैसे कोई शख्स जो है उसकी जान जा सकती है अगर आप मौके पे उसकी हेल्प नहीं करते. और कोई शख्स जो है वो अपनी इंटरव्यू देने के लिए जा रहा है किसी जॉब के लिए, और वहाँ पे खड़ा हुआ है, उसका टायर पंक्चर हो गया गाड़ी का, एंड नोबडी स्टॉप्स फॉर हेल्प, तो वो शख्स जो है वो उसकी ज़िंदगी में इससे भी प्रॉब्लम्स पैदा हो सकते हैं. सो Plevian et al. Maintained that actually that is the cost and reward analysis when the decision of helping is concerned. And they say that their theory is actually called emotional arousal and cost reward assessment theory. And they say that actually emotional arousal is involved in this whole procedure. अब emotional arousal कैसे involved है? Whenever a person is in emergency, then we are aroused. And definitely through socialization we have learned that we should help other people. Or when we are aroused, then there is a drive, और वो drive reduction theory जो है वो उसको explain करती है कि we feel very uncomfortable when someone is in emergency, and that uncomfort is only reduced when we are capable to help that person, and that is explaining through, जैसे मैंने पहले कहा कि फिर वो drive जो है वो reduce हो जाती है, and then we are back to a comfortable stage. अब ये एक मैं आपको यहाँ पे एक diagram दिखा रही हूँ which will mention that how do we weigh cost and reward analysis as far as prosocial behavior is concerned. So you can see that there could be a cost for direct help, and there could also be a cost for no help. As far as cost for direct help is concerned, it could be cost could be high and low, and similar is the case as it is the cost for no help. So the cost could be high and low in both examples. When the cost for helping and not helping is low, then we usually decide according to perceived norms. जो भी नॉर्म्स हैं उस मुआशरे के कल्चर के उसके मुताबिक हम हेल्प करते हैं, क्योंकि दोनों की कॉस्ट लो है. हमें भी ज़्यादा मसला नहीं होगा अगर हम हेल्प कर देंगे, और अगर नहीं भी हेल्प करेंगे तो वो जो विक्टिम है उसको भी ज़्यादा मसला नहीं होगा. अगर दोनों की कॉस्ट जो है वो हाई है तो दैट इज़ द प्रॉब्लम विच इज़ रियली conflict inducing in the person. For example, if the cost for direct help is high and the cost for no help is also high, देन व्हाट हैपन्स कि एक शख्स जो है, उसकी मिसाल लेते हैं कि उसकी जान खतरे में है, और अगर आप उसकी जान बचाते हैं तो आपकी जान भी खतरे में पड़ सकती है। तो यहाँ पर द पर्सन कैन टेक टू कोर्स ऑफ एक्शन। अब व्हाट आर दीज टू कोर्स ऑफ एक्शन? वन इज दैट द पर्सन विल बी टेकिंग इनडायरेक्ट इंटरवेंशन, दैट पर्सन कुड कॉल पुलिस, एमरजेंसी को कॉल कर ले, जो एमरजेंसी में पुलिस होती है, या फिर लोगों को इकट्ठा कर ले एंड कुड बी एबल टू रेंडर हेल्प टू दैट पर्सन। ऑल्टरनेटिवली ये हो सकता है कि दैट पर्सन इज नॉट रेडी टू टेक एनी स्टेप बिकॉज ही थिंक्स दैट द कॉस्ट फॉर हिम इज वेरी हाई। तो फिर वो क्या कर सकता है कि ही वुड रीडिफाइन द सिचुएशन। एंड हाउ ही वुड रीडिफाइन द सिचुएशन? He would redefine the situation by making him satisfied by saying that this is not really an emergency. या फिर ये कहकर कि I am not only person who is going to help that person, there are several other people are present here. So that is diffusion of responsibility. And maybe sometime people could satisfy them by saying to them कि the victim is responsible for what is happening to him or her. तो दो तरह की चीज़ें हो सकती हैं। एक तो ये है कि आपको इनडायरेक्ट एक्शन ले लेते हैं, दूसरा ये है कि अपने आप को मुतमईन करने के लिए डिफरेंट एक्सप्लेनेशंस अपने आप को पेश कर देते हैं। और यूजुअली दिस इज डन टू मेंटेन अ कॉग्निटिव कंसिस्टेंसी बिटवीन एटीट्यूड एंड बिहेवियर। हाउ देयर विल बी अ कॉग्निटिव डिसोनेंस इन दैट केस? अगर आप ये बिलीव करते हैं कि वी शुड बी एबल टू हेल्प दोज पीपल हु नीड हेल्प एट द टाइम ऑफ क्राइसिस, और आप उनकी हेल्प नहीं करते, then the person becomes uncomfortable. And to reduce that uncomfortable condition, the person redefines the situation. तो इस तरीके से जो है, when emotions are aroused, then the person weighs cost and reward of the situations of helping and not helping, and in the light of those decisions, फिर शख्स डिसाइड करता है कि उसको हेल्प करनी चाहिए या नहीं। Now we'll be talking about who helps. What are certain conditions in people which induce them to help other people? लोग किस तरह की हालत में होते हैं, किस तरह की स्टेट में होते हैं, किस तरह का उनके जहनी कैफियत होती है when they think that they should be helping other people. So one aspect is positive and negative moods. When people are in positive moods, it has been shown that they are more inclined to help other people. For example, Alice Eisen in 1970 administered a series of tests to college students and teachers. And in those experiments, there were 3 experimental conditions and there was 1 control condition. अब experimental conditions कौन सी थी? एक experimental condition में participants को ये बताया गया कि they were successful on the test. In the second experimental condition, participants were told that they actually failed that test. And in the third experimental situation, experimenters, participants were not told anything. कोई उनको result उस test का नहीं बताया गया. And then there was 1 control condition, और control condition में कोई test ही नहीं लिया गया और सिर्फ उसका जो effect था direct वो देखा गया, और direct effect क्या था अभी उस बात की तरफ चलते हैं. So what happened that there were 3 experimental conditions and 1 control conditions, and then the results showed that the participants who had succeeded at the test, they actually didn't succeed or fail, they were told that they were successful and they were told that they failed that test. So the participants who had succeeded at the test, they were later more likely to help a woman who was struggling with an armful of books than any of the other participants. तो वो एक जो उनको मैनेज करने की कोशिश कर रही थी किताबों को, तो ये देखा गया कि वो लोग जिनको ये बताया गया था कि आपका टेस्ट बड़ा अच्छा हुआ है एंड यू आर सक्सेसफुल इन द टेस्ट, दे वर मोर लाइकली टू हेल्प अ वुमन हु वाज हैविंग सम प्रॉब्लम, चाहे वो किताबें इकट्ठी कर रही है, उससे उठाई नहीं जा रही, मैनेज नहीं हो रही, वट एवर वॉज द कंडीशन, एंड दोज पीपल वर मोर इंक्लाइंड टू हेल्प एज कम्पेयर टू एनी ऑफ द पार्टिसिपेंट्स. और बाकी 3 कंडीशंस हैं. एक कंट्रोल कंडीशंस को तो आप छोड़ दें क्योंकि उसमें तो कोई मैनिपुलेशन नहीं थी. बाकी 2 कंडीशंस ये हैं कि द पर्सन थॉट दैट दे हैड फेल्ड दैट टेस्ट एंड इन अदर कंडीशन दे वर नॉट टोल्ड एनीथिंग. तो न्यूट्रल सा मूड था, दे वर एक्सपेक्टिंग कि पता नहीं टेस्ट में हमारा रिजल्ट क्या आया हुआ होगा. अब द क्वेश्चन अराइजेज दैट व्हाट इज इन पॉजिटिव mood which induces people to help other people. So there could be several explanations for having a positive mood and relationship with pro-social behavior. One is that when we are in a positive mood, in a good mood, then we perceive other people in a positive way. We perceive that other people are honest and good people, and we do not perceive them negatively. Another reason is that when we are in a good mood, then we are more likely to think about the rewarding situation or rewards that are associated with help. जैसे कि हमें अच्छा feel होता है कि हमने किसी की मदद की है, so we are feeling good. And another explanation is that when you are in a good mood, then you are not very much concentrating on your own mood. आप जब नेगेटिव मूड होता है तो ज़्यादा आप अपने बारे में सोचते हैं, और जब पॉजिटिव मूड होता है यू आर नॉट बहुत ज़्यादा इंक्लाइंड नहीं होते, यू आर नॉट लुकिंग व्हाट इज़ हैपनिंग इनसाइड यू, बिकॉज दैट हैपन्स मोस्टली व्हेन यू आर इन नेगेटिव स्टेट. हम ज़्यादा सेल्फ अवेयर होते हैं नेगेटिव स्टेट में. सो दीज आर द एक्सप्लेनेशंस दैट व्हाई पीपल विल बी रेंडरिंग मोर हेल्प व्हेन दे आर इन गुड मूड. एंड देयर आर सेवरल एग्जांपल्स of inducing good mood that have shown relationship with helping behavior. For example, people are more likely to help others when on sunny days than on cloudy ones, and that was shown by Kamangam in 1979. और इसमें भी variations हैं because people in western countries or maybe those countries which are relatively having cold weather as compared to Pakistan, they are not very happy on cloudy days because वहाँ सनशाइन ज़्यादा नहीं होती. एंड एज़ कम्पेयर टू दैट इन पाकिस्तान पीपल आर रिलेटिवली हैप्पी ऑन क्लाउडी डेज. अगर उनकी सीवरेज वगैरह सिस्टम ठीक हैं और वहाँ पे उनकी गलियों में पानी नहीं आ जाता या कोई और ख़राबी नहीं होती, दे आर रिलेटिवली हैप्पी ऑन क्लाउडी डेज. एंड दे आर मोर इरीटेटेड व्हेन इट इज़ हॉट समर. सो इट डिपेंड्स ऑन द सिचुएशन कि आप किस तरह की सिचुएशन में यू आर इन अ बेटर मूड. And then another study which was conducted by Eisen and Levin in 1972, it showed that people after finding money or being offered a tasty treat were more likely to help other people. So you can see that positive affect can be induced by a number of things. Or jab positive affect is there, then pro-social behavior is there. Another example, Northettle and Wilson, they showed that people are in good mood after listening to uplifting music or when they have seen a comedy. So uske baad they are more likely to help other people. So it shows that positive affect and positive mood is relating with more pro-social behavior. There are some other experiments which show that sometime when people are in bad mood, then they are inclined to help other people also. And this is what is exactly opposite what we have discussed as far as the relationship between pro-social behavior and positive mood. One of the study was conducted by Eisen and her co-workers in 1973, and that showed that people who believed they had failed at an experimental task, they were more likely to help another person than those who did not experience failure. So this is surprising that if people are more inclined to help other people when they are in good mood, then what happens in negative mood that people are also likely to help other people? Or maybe researchers say that there is one thing common in both when people are in bad mood and they help, and when people are in good mood and then they help. And there is one possible link between the good and bad mood is the rewarding properties of helping. That people think that it is very reinforcing that they have helped somebody, so they feel good about themselves. So this is a kind of reward that people get when they are helping somebody without any reason. I would mention here one study that will show a relationship between negative mood and helping behavior. And that negative mood, in fact, was a kind of guilt feeling. That study was conducted by Michael Cunningham and his colleagues in 1980. So in that experiment, or the experiment jo tha, actually that was a field study. बाहर ओपन में रोड पर की गई थी. So in that study, a young man who asked people to use his camera to take his picture for a class project was a confederate. तो उसने ये रास्ते में किसी से कहा कि प्लीज़ आप मेरी पिक्चर ले लें. अब वो कैमरा जो था दैट वाज नॉट फंक्शनिंग, असल में वो ख़राब था. लेकिन द पर्सन हु वुड टेक फोटो ही वुडंट नो अबाउट दैट. तो वो जब कैमरा नहीं चला तो उसने वो कॉन्फिडरेट से कहा कि भाई ये कैमरा तो नहीं चल रहा है. तो कॉन्फिडरेट सेड after examining camera closely and said the helper, have you touched any of the buttons or dials? So in that way he induced guilt in that person कि कैमरा जैसे पहले तो ठीक था और कैमरे को जब दूसरे शख्स ने तस्वीर लेने के लिए हाथ लगाया है तो उसने किसी से गलती से किसी बटन को या डायल को टच कर दिया जिसकी वजह से वो ख़राब हो गया. So in that way guilt was induced in the helper. So what happened afterwards? So these now guilty people passed a young woman who suddenly dropped a file folder containing some papers. इसके बाद वो आगे चलता है वो शख्स with having guilt in mind and sees a young woman who dropped her files. So how do you think they responded to this needy situation? What will happen? So it was seen that 80% of guilty people helped as compared to 40% passersby. तो जो लोग वहाँ से गुजर रहे थे and they were not the part of the experiment. सिर्फ ये देखा गया कि उनमें से कितने लोग जो हैं उस खातून की मदद करने के लिए आगे आते हैं. And it was seen that those people who were in a negative mood due to the induction of that guilt feeling, they were more inclined to help. So this experiment shows a relationship between negative mood and helping behavior. So then this shows a controversial issues कि there is a controversy in both kind of arguments that whether positive mood is related with pro-social behavior or negative mood is related. So there is a debate over the effect of negative mood on pro-social behavior. Studies have suggested that when we experience extremely negative moods such as grief or depression, we may be so focused on our own emotional state that we simply don't notice others' needs and concerns. And that study was conducted by Carlson and Miller in 1987. So they said when we are in extremely negative mood, then we concentrate on our own needs and then we are not able to pay attention to other people's needs. जैसा कि मैंने पहले कहा था कि we are more self-aware of what is happening inside us. So this shows a relationship between negative mood and it explains why negative mood is not associated with helping behavior. And some other studies have shown that even when experiencing less severe negative moods, we are less likely to help than those who are in good moods, and that was shown in 1984 by Eisen. It means कि ज़रूरी नहीं है कि बहुत extreme negative mood में आप help नहीं करते, बल्कि थोड़ा सा भी negative mood हो, people are less inclined to help other people as compared to those people who are in a good mood. So this controversial issue was researched by other researchers, and then it was explained by Cialdini and Kernick in 1976. They said that the negative state relief model answers this debate by asserting that perceived benefits for helping determine whether bad moods will lead to help or not. That you will think about what are the benefits associated with helping, and then in the light of those benefits you will decide whether you will render help to somebody or not. I'll show you a diagram now that explains this model that has been presented by these researchers. And this diagram shows that when you are in good mood, then you are more likely to anticipate rewards. And then also you want to prolong your good mood. जैसा कि मैंने पहले explain किया था कि when we are in a positive mood, we want to maintain that good mood. इसी वजह से हम help करते हैं ताकि हमें अच्छा feel होता रहे. And then you perceive people in good light. So these are different explanations of why we are in a good state, in a good affect while we are helping other people. So when you are in a good mood, you are more inclined to help other people because you want to maintain your good behavior. You perceive other people in good light, you notice others' needs, and you are more inclined to help other people. As compared to that, if there is no reward, and if you think that if you help somebody, then it will destroy your mood rather than increasing and boosting your mood, then you do not render help. So it is an analysis between the reward and cost of helping. As compared to that, if the person is in a bad mood, then that person is more focusing on his own emotions. And when that person focusing on his own emotions, then it reduces likelihood of noticing other people's need. So consequently, that help is not provided, and that person is not inclined to help because that person is more concerned about his or her own needs. एक और condition ये है कि when people are in bad mood, then if they desire to improve their mood, अगर वो चाहते हैं कि उनका improve जो है वो mood हो जाए और उनको उस bad mood से निजात मिल जाए, then two kinds of conditions could happen, that more help will be provided if cost outweighs rewards. अगर cost जो है वो कम है और reward जो है वो ज़्यादा है, तो फिर आप help करेंगे. As compared to that, less help will be provided if mood is elevated by other sources. और आपको लग रहा है कि मुझे help करने की बजाय किसी और चीज़ से मेरा mood ठीक हो जाएगा, जैसे talking to some friend, watching movie or something, then help is not provided. Now we'll be reviewing what we have studied today. Today we talked about two psychological processes that could inhibit or prevent helping on different stages of the bystander intervention model. The first is audience inhibition effect and the second is diffusion of responsibility. The audience inhibition effect states that we are influenced by the response of the other person who is also present in the same situation with us. And then we have two kinds of concepts in our mind. If the situation is ambiguous, तो usually हम ये देखते हैं कि जैसे बाकी लोग behave कर रहे हैं, उसी तरह से behave करते हैं. And then if the situation is not that ambiguous, then sometimes we do not render help to other people because we think that if we render help to someone, then we will be evaluated negatively. और उस negative evaluation से बचने के लिए हम लोगों को help offer नहीं करते. As compared to that, diffusion of responsibility states that sometime there is a clear emergency और situation ambiguous भी नहीं होती और हमें पता होता है कि यहाँ पे help जो है वो ज़रूरी है. उसके बावजूद जो है, why does it happen that people do not render and offer help to other people who are in emergency situation? And different theories and different researches, whether they were field studies or experimental studies, they have shown that when other people are present, we do not think that it is solely our responsibility to rescue that person who is in problem. और जितने ज़्यादा लोग जो हैं हमारी सिचुएशन में बढ़ते जाते हैं, उतना ही चांस जो है वो हेल्प का कम हो जाता है. एंड देन फाइनली वी टॉक्ड अबाउट हु इज द पर्सन हु डिसाइड्स टू हेल्प अदर पर्सन इन डिस्ट्रेस और इन emergency situation. And then we talked about what is the effect of good and bad mood. And generally, it has been seen that when people are in good mood, they are more inclined to help other people. And the reason is when you are in a good mood, you perceive other people and your situation in a positive way, and at the same time, you are not concentrating on your own needs. And also because that you want to keep and maintain that positive mood. As compared to that, when people are in a bad mood, then they are less likely to help other people because they are concentrating more on their needs. लेकिन ये भी देखा गया है कि actually people think and outweigh and they have an analysis of cost and benefit कि जिसमें benefit help में ज़्यादा है या उनको cost ज़्यादा pay करनी पड़ रही है, तो फिर उनका negative और positive mood decide करता है whether they will be available to help or not. अगले लेक्चर में हम थोड़ा सा प्रो सोशल बिहेवियर के बारे में बात करेंगे इन द बिगिनिंग, एंड देन वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट नेक्स्ट चैप्टर, और वो चैप्टर जो है वो दैट इज़ डिफरेंट फ्रॉम प्रो सोशल बिहेवियर. तो अगले लेक्चर तक के लिए अल्लाह हाफिज़.